Okay, long time no talkie, long time. I got some pretty terrible ones and some that I'm not too ashamed of, and then that's it. But I'll just get them all out of the way. Some of them are pretty short and stupid, and I don't know why they are there. So I was thinking about the other day, it was just how maybe I think some people would say doing a Scottish, Irish, Welsh, Australian accent, the accent of a generally white population, isn't racist, but then obviously doing a Indian, Jamaican or Asian sounding accent somehow suddenly becomes racist. But yeah, I imagine there's something there. Anyway, you'll find everything's a whole lot easier once it's in the past. Wow, how profound. My aptitudes for reading are somewhat reversed. It takes me months to read and only hours to forget. Okay. I think the kind of consciousness we're seeking to create requires an understanding of the subject that they are conscious. What the fuck? Requires an understanding of the subject, as in the subject who is supposedly conscious, that they are conscious. I think it's entirely possible, and is the most common case, that a system, biological or otherwise, can be conscious without knowing that it is conscious. They simply lack the modules necessary to comprehend what it means to have the subjective experience they are having. So, in reality, I think all complex information processing systems are conscious to some degree, although in most cases one that is so simple relative to ours that we cannot comprehend what it would ever be like to be one. But to achieve the consciousness we know, we'd need to provide the necessary tools for understanding, or at the very least introspecting their own consciousness. It's just basically saying nothing that recognition of self, or whatever it is that humans have, that, things like gorillas don't or something. Sometimes I wonder whether people consider non-primary effects of genotypes that may offer an evolutionary advantage. Obviously they do, fucking idiot. There is probably a much easier example, but I imagine baldness in men is either passed off as either not being an evolutionary an evolutionary disadvantage, or providing some negligible benefit, like being more streamlined or allowing water to run off rather than dripping in the eyes, impairing visibility. But it is a secondary effect ever considered, like perhaps being bald causes people to behave differently towards you for whatever reason, e.g. they view you as less or more attractive. That may be a primary effect, whatever. But secondarily, you behave a different way because of the way you are perceived, or you undergo a certain psychological trial by nature of your baldness and the way the community views you, which alters your psychology, hardens it perhaps, in a way that is evolutionarily advantageous. Well, I stumbled through that one, didn't I? Jesus Christ. The idea isn't that stupid, but the way I make it sound when I say it is. By dint of me saying it, makes it stupid. That's not. By dint of me saying it, it becomes stupid. There we go. Jesus Christ. Fucking idiot. I find myself in a familiar predicament, just with a new combination of words. I need something to care about. The poor, meh. The young, I'm sure they'll figure it out. A lover, I don't seem to like any of the people I like, or at least I'm never satisfied with the reasons that I like them. AI, I don't have any of the skills, nor do I enjoy learning the skills required to make any advancements in the field. And this is the one that really gets on my nerves: success. When the hell did everyone get so obsessed with success? And I don't think this is a problem with the true etymology of the word. I'm not even sure if I know what etymology really means of the word, but many people seem to be under the illusions that the success they want is by definition zero sum. And if that were the case, I don't think it would be hard for them to realise that not only would their success be... Oh, Jesus Christ. Oh, bloody hell, I'll go over it. Not only would their success be dependent on the failure of others, but that they would be guaranteed to be aspiring for a statistically outlying position. The idea for maybe writing a book, I've hated the idea before, wanted to do it, then hated it, and still hate it. I still do hate the idea, but I quite like the idea of writing a novel, because I think, novels often, like Orwell and all that, they kind of tackle something and they have a broader scope and kind of reach a wider audience, but then accompanying it with a non-fiction book that outlines the things it's really getting at, just in case, so nothing's lost in translation. Anyway, There seems to be a lot of hostility towards nihilism at the moment, especially from the Jordan Peterson affiliates. I've stated so many times before how to subscribe solely to one philosophical sect and reject all others is folly. Clearly there is truth, real Sam Harris truth, not Jordan's Lionel Hutz truth. There is some truth in all of these well-founded belief systems. Oh, I was about to add something there that I forgot to write. What was I going to say? I've said it's kind of like a Venn diagram. The optimal place is to have, so you have nihilism as one circle, and then all the other things, hedonism, everything, pragmatism, fucking consequentialism, utilitarianism, and obviously the bit where all those things overlap, the Venn diagram, the section of the Venn diagram where all those bits overlap is probably the best place to be. There are some truths in the well-founded beliefs anyway, and so the collective truth would involve incorporating aspects of all of them. I am to some extent still a nihilist, but also a hedonist, or hedonist, whatever, and a strong self-interestist, a pragmatist, a realist, a consequentialist, a utilitarian, and so on. But, and only to address nihilism for simplicity's sake, what I take from nihilism is that I know that I don't know there is some divine plan for me and my future, and, more importantly, that even if I were to feel that this was the case, or that there was a divine plan for me, and I could feel what my purpose was, this would in no way be evidence as to the truth of such a claim, that it was divine or whatever. But I don't make the unsupported conclusion that therefore my life can have no meaning, with the weird assumption that meaning can only come from an explicitly extrinsic source. It may well be, in fact, I don't see how this could ever be otherwise, but the totality of our characters are the products of the interactions of all the variables in the universe prior to our and during our existence. And given the impossibility of you in the most specific and exact sense, having existed prior to your existence, I'm saying that's impossible, right? And thus not being able to influence the things which would influence you. But of course, even this wouldn't be what the hell? But even this, hang on. But of course, even if this weren't impossible, you'd come up against the same problem of who created the creator. Anyway, coupling this with the impossibility of true free will, it should be apparent that the character referred to is just the momentary expression of interplay of all these variables and the subsequent interplay of the results of the previous moment's interaction between those variables. I think for the most part I am able to separate the art from the artist. It's been a while since I watched any Louis C.K. material, but I think I would like to. I remember finding some of his stand-up to be the funniest I've ever heard, or seen, I suppose. Leaving aside the fact that I find what he did not as bad as it sometimes is purported to be, although obviously still reprehensible. In fact, in many ways I feel embarrassed for him, having so much power, but being so dominated by his desires as to use it for something so degrading for him. I know there'll be quarrels with me saying why it was degrading for him, but I think in some ways it is. Anyway, obviously it's degrading to the women as well. I'm not saying they're not. They are mutually exclusive. Yes, and I realise this isn't a perfect analogy, in part because you can't just choose another of the vast selection of material to replace the tainted one in the case of science. But if Einstein turned out to be a paedophile, would we stop using his equations for special relativity? I'm not even sure if that's, equations for special relativity. Well, that's probably not what he's known for. I don't even know. Anyway, I'm just trying to, you get the point. I imagine I've already tackled this before, but I've just seen Jordan Peterson's video, The Problem with Atheism again. In truth, because my dislike for Jordan has been reduced thanks to some of his recent utterings and appearances. Anyway, he suggests, not necessarily recent, but recent me coming across them. I still don't like his whole God stuff, but I'll come across that. I'll tackle that in a minute. Anyway, he suggests at one point that self-interest theory is a solid philosophical thesis, but implies that it is evil, and almost equates its outcomes with psychopathy. Psychopathy. God. See, you really make yourself sound like an idiot if you say a word wrong and then try to say it correctly in a slow, methodical way. Psychopathy. Again, and that makes you sound like an even more of an idiot when you do that. Again, I have a fairly simple rebuttal to this, I believe. The best self-interest theory would take into account all the things that could and would make your life as good as possible for the longest time, cumulatively. It is not immediate self-interest theory. See how I had to put emphasis on the not there? It is not immediate self-interest theory. Investments work and have substantial benefits over immediate conciliation. Not sure if that's the right word at all, but I'll use it. I knew it wasn't reconciliation, so maybe it was conciliation. To not have sex with a more attractive woman, even though the offer is on the table, and would clearly provide immediate sexual pleasure, is clearly an investment, and the expected reward, although of course you don't have to be conscious of this, and thus seemingly cynical as to make the investment in the first place, but is an investment in the pleasure across time that will be available to you from your long-term relationship should you not terminate that relationship by cheating. Or risk terminating that relationship by being caught cheating, I suppose. In fact, a way to visualize this is to imagine a space-time eudaimonia / pleasure, if you can detach that word from its controversies, matrix, and imagine each occupying an axis on a graph. Time on the x-axis, space on the y-axis. It may be easier to imagine one axis representing all 3 dimensions, despite the seeming additional complexity of this, and eudaimonia on the z-axis. The aim is to maximize the volume of area under the curve of this graph. I picture something that I don't know why, you don't really need space there anyway, it's just I wanted it to be 3D for some reason. Anyhow, maybe you could add another eudaimonia axis and replace the space one. I picture something that reminds me slightly of those bubbles that are made by waving those massive bubble sticks through the air to make non-homogeneous elongated bubbles. God, why do I have to use words like this? I'm such a prick. And it gets thicker at some points, and then thicker, and then thicker again, thinner, and then thicker again, and so on. And I know that Jordan in some way understands this. He often profligates Carl Jung, who I don't like immediately because of footage of him calling anyone who doesn't believe in psychic powers some variation of stupid. But Jung's idea of the self, that is what Jordan goes on about. And this is a very simple idea, which for whatever reason Jordan seems to believe to be complicated. Time isn't that weird. I'm saying it's very simple, and then therefore I don't think it's that profound what Carl Jung said about it. The idea that it's basically saying what time is, that you are a person that exists throughout time. I don't think that's that weird. Anyway, time isn't that weird. It just adds on all the things now to whatever came before. That was a stupid sentence, shouldn't put that one in. But also Jordan seems to be happy to call all the things that fall under the interplay between variables the domain of God. And I didn't capture that at all then. But he thinks that God is a good word for basically just determinism is what I'll come up against. Anyway, the deterministic nature of the universe. That doesn't capture it at all. Obviously, the main issue is repurposing any word which has previous connotations disassociated with what you mean. But there are so many words that are less counterproductive and give at least some semblance of what you're trying to convey. Time, progression, natural selection, determinism. Just come up with a new word. And then I come up with a stupid word, which I don't think I'll say it. Bluckensculp. Obviously, it's not the real suggestion, but you know what I mean. Right, got through those fairly quickly, so good. Let's leave it at that. Let's try and make it squish.